Many people struggle with procrastination, actually starting the tasks and projects they are working on. And therefore, there's a lot of self-improvement content out there evolving around the topic of procrastination. But interestingly enough, there's not too much about how to keep going after starting, and especially about finishing the tasks you're working on. Even though this is incredibly important, if not even more important than starting. Because starting is difficult, but actually finishing something is just on a whole other level. In this video, I want to talk about why that is, and I want to give you a very simple solution that will help you to finally finish your projects. Now, why is finishing your tasks actually that difficult? Well, I don't know about you, but I personally love to start new projects because it is kind of exciting. It gives me this feeling of opportunity and possibility. And so I start out pretty strong most of the time, and then I fall off over the course of a couple of days or weeks. And that's because the deeper I dive into something, the more difficult it seems to be. And it turns out that finishing something actually is the hardest part of the process, because in the end, it all has to come together. And this is why so many people actually have difficulties to finish their projects. But then finishing your task is just so important for a couple of reasons. First of all, obviously, results matter the most. So a project that isn't finished doesn't really exist out there, right? You don't release an unfinished song or an unfinished book. You don't publish an unfinished article. You have to finish the tasks before they can be shown to the world. And this is the most important thing. But then also on a psychological level, it just helps you to move forward. Nothing builds more confidence and motivation than you finishing something. Even if it's just a small project, it just helps you to feel better about your ability to create something, because once it's finished, well, then you can finally go on to the next one. And you can do that with excitement and content because you finished what you were working on before. It also just frees your mind from the thought of having to work on a project. Because if it's done, you have closed the loop. So from then on, you just don't have to keep it in the back of your mind. Now, how do we actually finish projects? Well, I want to say that the most important thing is not to commit to too many things at once. The best thing would be to just work on one thing at a time, if that's possible for you, and make it a point to get it done before you start anything else. Well, I understand that in some context of work, this doesn't work, and I'll come to that in a minute. But this should be the ideal state, because the cost of switching between different tasks is just too high. It takes too much time and energy to do that. So you should always focus on finishing something before you start something else. So I want you to adopt the mindset and the identity of a finisher. Someone who not just starts things and talks about them, but actually gets them done. If this is you, you'll be incredibly effective. And therefore you must make finishing tasks your most important metric. And one thought that might help you with that is keeping in mind that one finished project is worth more than a billion started but unfinished ones. So I want to give you an example of my work life as a journalist. So as a journalist, I have to work on a lot of different projects at the same time. I have to write text, I have to edit text of other people, I have to create postings for social media, I have to work on the website, I have to create newsletters, and so on and so forth. And I have to kind of manage all of this at the same time. And while this is kind of great because it never gets boring, the cost of constantly switching between these different tasks is just incredibly high. It's draining, and it just costs a lot of time because every time you switch, you first have to get going again. So one thing I have adopted over the past years of being a journalist is that I try to focus on finishing tasks more than on managing different tasks at once, because before I did that, I was constantly switching and it felt kind of great. And every time I got stuck, I would switch the task and I would switch to something else until I got stuck there. And then I'd switch again and I'd kind of feel productive, but I would take ages to get anything done. And the cost of having all of these tasks in the back of my mind was just incredibly high. So the better solution was to focus on one thing at a time. And yes, I would be interrupted by coworkers and have to talk about other things, but I constantly go back to this one main project and make it a point to get it finished and then load it off, forget about it, and then I would have more space and more mental energy to get the other things done, rather than constantly switching. So if you take anything away from this video, it should be this. Try to do less things, but do them better, and make it a point to finish them before you start another project. And not only is this great because it will give you better results, but also because it will give you more learnings and you'll grow way faster, because finished projects are the ones you will learn the most of, because only then you get feedback from coworkers or customers and you can improve over time. And also just these last like 10 to 20% of finishing a task, even though they feel like kind of tedious and they're probably the most difficult part of the whole process, they will usually teach you the most about what it is you're working on. So if your problem is actually starting a task and procrastinating on that, I made this video for you where I talk about 2 weird habits that help me to overcome procrastination for good. I wish you a very nice day and I hope to see you very soon. Goodbye.